Fusulo 22. Easiest peppers, huge harvests, zero effort. Have you ever walked through the produce aisle at a place like Whole Foods or even your local Kroger, looked at the price of organic bell peppers and thought, there has to be a better way? I've been there. I remember one summer, I spent nearly $50 on those fancy designer pepper starts from a high-end nursery, only to have them shrivel up before July even hit. It felt like I was throwing money straight into the compost bin. If that's happened to you, I want you to know right now, it is not your fault. You don't have a black thumb. Most of the time, we're sold plants that were pumped with greenhouse hormones just to look good on a shelf, but they aren't ready for the reality of a real American backyard or a breezy apartment balcony. Today, I'm changing that for you. We're going to talk about the peppers that actually want to live. I'm talking about the varieties that ignite with flavor and produce so many pods you'll be giving them away to your neighbors over the fence. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which plants are the absolute zero-effort kings of the garden. We're going to bust the myth that peppers are finicky, and I'll show you a simple 10-second test to know if your plant is thirsty without ever buying a moisture meter. We'll even touch on why your local Home Depot might be leading you toward the most expensive mistakes. Before we hit the 1-minute mark, let's get one thing straight. Peppers love three things: heat, drainage, and being left alone just a little bit. Let's start with our first heavy hitter, the banana pepper. If you want to win early in the season, this is your plant. I call this the confidence booster because it's almost impossible to kill. Most beginners make the mistake of starting with the giant, four-lobed California Wonder bell peppers. Don't get me wrong, they're classic, but they take forever to ripen and often rot on the vine if the humidity is weird. The banana pepper, however, starts pumping out fruit while it's still relatively small. You'll see those long, pale yellow fingers hanging down, and the best part is they are delicious at every stage. What the stores don't tell you is that these plants are actually heavy feeders, but they don't need fancy bottled chemicals. When I first started, I thought I needed a different magic blue powder for every vegetable. Truth is, a little bit of aged compost or a cheap bag of balanced 10-10-10 fertilizer from Lowe's is all they ask for. The common mistake I see, and I did this for years, is planting them in a pot that doesn't have enough holes. If you're using a decorative ceramic pot from Target that only has one tiny hole in the center, your pepper's roots are basically sitting in a swamp. These plants hate wet feet. Here is a practical, today, action for your banana peppers. Check the weight of the pot. Pick it up when it's dry, then water it until it runs out the bottom, and pick it up again. That weight difference is your new best friend. You'll eventually be able to just walk by, tilt the pot with one finger, and know if it needs a drink. It's way more accurate than any gadget. These peppers are perfect for salads, pickling, or just eating raw right off the plant while you're checking the mail. They handle the fluctuating temperatures of a typical Midwest or Southern summer like a champ. Now, I know some of you are looking for that classic American heat. That's where the jalapeno comes in. If the banana pepper is the confidence booster, the jalapeno is the pantry king. It's the most forgiving pepper on the planet. I remember one summer in my old house where I literally forgot a jalapeno plant in a black plastic nursery pot behind the shed. It didn't rain for 10 days, and the temperature hit 95 degrees. When I found it, the leaves were drooping like wet tissue paper. I gave it a good soak in a 5-gallon bucket, and by the next morning, it was standing upright, looking at me like nothing happened. They are incredibly resilient. What the stores don't tell you at the garden center is that there are actually tame versions of these now. If you see a tag that says Tam Jalapeno or Culapeño, those give you all the smoky, deep flavor without the burn that makes you reach for the milk. It's a great way to ignite your cooking without the drama. However, if you want the classic kick, the trick is to look at the skin. If you see little tan lines that look like stretch marks, gardeners call this corking. That means the pepper is stressed and likely very spicy. If the skin is smooth as glass, it's usually milder. A common mistake I see in neighborhoods all over the US is people planting these too close together in a raised bed. They see those cute little 4-inch pots and think they can fit 6 of them in a square foot. By July, those plants are fighting for air, the humidity gets trapped, and suddenly you've got white fuzzy mold on the stems. Give them 18 inches of space. They need the breeze to move through the leaves to stay dry. I want to talk about the nursery trap. Have you ever noticed how the plants at the store always have these giant, dark green leaves and maybe even a few peppers already growing on them? It's tempting to grab the one with the biggest pepper, right? I used to do that every time. But here's the reality. Those plants are often root-bound. Their roots have hit the plastic walls of the pot and started growing in circles. When you put that in your garden, the plant stays stunted because the roots don't know they're free. I actually prefer buying the ugly, smaller plants. They have more energy to spend on growing roots in your soil than maintaining a pepper they grew in a greenhouse. If you do buy a plant with a pepper already on it, do the unthinkable. Pick it off. I know it hurts. I cried the first time I did it. But by removing that one pepper, you're telling the plant, hey, stop trying to be a parent and focus on your own growth. In 2 weeks, that plant will be twice as big as the one you left alone. One thing I've learned from living in different USDA zones is that the sun isn't the same everywhere. If you're in Arizona, full sun might actually scorch your plants. If you're in Washington state, full sun is a rare gift you chase all day. For most of us in the middle, peppers want about 6 to 8 hours of that good morning and early afternoon light. If you see the leaves starting to look like they have paper-thin white patches, that's sunburn. Yes, plants get sunburned too. It usually happens when we move them from the store's shaded porch directly into our blazing backyards. Give them a transition day in the shade of your porch first. It saves you from losing the plant in the first 24 hours. I once lost a whole tray of habaneros because I was too impatient to let them acclimate. That was a $30 lesson I don't want you to have to pay for. The soil you use is another area where the marketing departments at the big stores try to get you. They want you to buy the premium potting mix with the moisture control crystals. Stay away from those for peppers. Those crystals hold onto water like a sponge, which is exactly what a pepper doesn't want. You want something that drains fast. I actually buy the cheapest potting soil and mix in a bag of perlite, those little white volcanic rocks that look like styrofoam. It creates air pockets. Remember, a pepper root needs to breathe just as much as it needs to drink. If you squeeze a handful of your soil and it stays in a hard, wet ball, your peppers are going to struggle. If it crumbles apart, you've hit the jackpot. This simple adjustment to your dirt can be the difference between a plant that produces until frost and one that turns yellow and gives up by July. You know why this happens even when you water correctly. It's a simple mistake that makes this plant stop blooming, and I'll show you the reason in the next part. The secret to why plants stop blooming, even when they seem perfectly hydrated, usually comes down to comfort zones. Believe it or not, a pepper plant can get too comfortable. If you've been feeding it high nitrogen fertilizer, the kind meant for lush green lawns, the plant thinks its only job is to grow big, beautiful leaves. It's living in a mansion with no reason to reproduce, which is what a pepper actually is. To get those flowers back, you have to create a little bit of healthy stress. I learned this the hard way after growing a bell pepper plant that was 4 feet tall and looked like a trophy hedge but didn't have a single pod. Once I switched to a fertilizer with a higher middle number phosphorus and let the soil dry out until the leaves just barely started to flag, the plant panicked and put out 50 blossoms in a week. This brings us to the Thai bird's eye pepper, the absolute king of small space gardening. If you live in a condo with just a small balcony or even a sunny kitchen windowsill, this is the plant that will change your life. In the US, we often think bigger is better, but this tiny powerhouse proves otherwise. These plants are compact, bushy, and produce hundreds of upright, colorful peppers. What nobody tells you at the big box store is that these peppers actually prefer a smaller pot. Putting a Thai pepper in a 15-gallon tub is like putting a toddler in a king-sized bed. They just get lost. A 2-gallon pot is the sweet spot. that keeps the roots snug and forces the plant to focus on making fruit. I remember a subscriber from Ohio once sent me a photo of her Thai pepper. She was so proud of how green it was, but she was worried because it was already August and there were no peppers. I told her, stop being so nice to it. She was watering it every single morning like clockwork. I told her to wait until the pot felt light as a feather. She called me 2 weeks later, ecstatic, because the plant was covered in tiny white stars that turned into fiery red pods. That's the protector tip I want you to carry today. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for your garden is to just step back and watch. Let's talk about the shishito. If you haven't jumped on the shishito bandwagon yet, you are missing out on the best snack plant in existence. These are incredibly popular in trendy bistros across the country, but they are ridiculously easy to grow at home. They have thin walls, which means they grow fast, while a bell pepper takes forever to build up its thick meat. A shishito is ready in a fraction of the time. You can harvest them when they are about 3 inches long and wrinkled. The zero effort part comes from their sheer productivity. One single plant in a 5-gallon bucket on your porch will produce enough for a full appetizer plate every single week for the whole summer. A common mistake with shishitos, and many beginners do this, is waiting for them to turn red. While they can turn red, they are traditionally eaten green. If you leave them on the plant too long, the skin gets a bit tougher and the plant slows down its production. The more you pick, the more it grows. It's a literal factory of flavor. Here is a practical, today, action. If you have a shishito, go out with a pair of scissors and harvest everything that looks full-sized. This tells the plant to start working on the next batch immediately. I once had a shishito plant survive a light frost under a burlap sack and keep giving me peppers into November. That's the kind of loyalty we want in a plant. Now, let's address the showcase trap. Again, you go to a garden center and see those beautiful ornamental peppers with purple leaves and neon-colored fruit. They look amazing, and the tag says, edible. Technically, they are, but they usually taste like spicy cardboard. I spent $10 on a midnight fire pepper once because it looked cool in my patio arrangement. It was a beautiful plant, but the peppers were so bitter I couldn't use them for anything. If you have limited space and you want flavor, stick to the culinary varieties we're discussing today. Save the ornamental stuff for the flower beds where you don't expect a meal. If you're growing in containers, which is how most Americans start, let's talk about the heat sink effect. If you use those cheap, black plastic nursery pots and leave them on a concrete patio in July, you are essentially boiling the roots. The black plastic absorbs the sun's heat and the concrete reflects it back up. I've seen root temperatures hit 110 degrees in some of my tests. That will kill a pepper faster than any bug. A simple fix? Wrap the pot in a light-colored burlap or just place the black pot inside a larger, decorative, light-colored ceramic pot with an air gap in between. It's like putting a sleeve on a coffee cup. It keeps the roots cool while the top of the plant enjoys the sun. Speaking of heat, have you ever noticed your pepper plants looking sad at 2 p.m., even if the soil is wet? This is what I call the midday siesta. Beginners often see this and think the plant is dying of thirst, so they drown it with more water. But the plant isn't thirsty, it's just shutting down its pores to conserve moisture because it's hot. If you water it then, you're just inviting root rot. If the plant perks back up by 6 p.m. when the sun goes down, it's perfectly healthy. Learning to distinguish between heat wilt and thirst wilt saved me hundreds of dollars in replacement plants over the years. I've had friends ask me, why are my peppers so small? They look like miniatures. Usually, this is a sign of a thrifty gardener. We all want to save money, but using old soil from last year's flower pots is a recipe for tiny, sad peppers. Peppers are hungry. They need fresh nutrients. If you must reuse soil, you have to recharge it with a good handful of worm castings or a high-quality organic fertilizer. Think of it like a car. You can't drive across the country on an empty tank. If you have kids or pets, the shishito and the sweet banana are your best friends. There's no risk of a pepper emergency if a toddler decides to take a bite. However, if you are growing the hotter varieties like jalapeno or Thai, there is a simple rule: never touch your eyes after pruning. I know it sounds like common sense, but I've been that guy. I spent 20 minutes with my face in a bowl of milk because I forgot I had been harvesting jalapenos. It's a mistake you only make once, but I'm here to make sure you don't make it at all. There's an important note if you have pets or live in a neighborhood with a lot of squirrels. These furry little guys love to dig in fresh potting soil, and sometimes they even take a test bite out of your ripening peppers. I'll show you the $2 solution that keeps them away without using chemicals in just a moment. The $2 solution for those pesky squirrels and neighborhood cats is something I stumbled upon after losing an entire crop of sweet banana peppers to a very curious backyard squirrel. He didn't even eat them. He just took one bite out of each pod and left them on the ground to rot. I went to the dollar store and bought a large container of cheap ground cinnamon and a bottle of red pepper flakes. I sprinkled a ring of fire around the base of my pots and over the surface of the soil. Squirrels hate the smell and the way it feels on their paws. It's organic, it's cheap, and it won't hurt your plants. In fact, cinnamon is a natural fungicide that helps prevent damping off in young seedlings. It's a win-win that protects your investment for less than the price of a cup of coffee. Now, let's talk about the poblano. If you love Mexican food or a good stuffed pepper, the poblano is the king of the mild but flavorful category. In the US, we often see these sold in grocery stores, but they are frequently bruised or soft. Growing them at home gives you a pepper that is firm, glossy, and holds up perfectly on a grill. These plants grow a bit larger and more upright than the bushy Thai peppers, often reaching 3 feet tall. Because they are bigger, they are the one pepper on my list where I truly recommend a 5 to 7 gallon container. What nobody tells you at the nursery is that poblanos have a very long hang time. You can harvest them when they are dark green and heart-shaped, which is when they are most common for chilies rellenos. But if you leave them on the plant until they turn a deep, chocolatey red, they develop a sweetness that is out of this world. When they are dried, they are called ancho peppers. This is where the anti-formula comes in. Don't just follow the tag on the plant. Experiment with the timing. I once left a few poblanos on the vine until they were almost wrinkled and red, and I used them to make a homemade hot sauce that my friends still ask for 3 years later. A common mistake with poblanos is light starvation. Because they are larger plants with broader leaves, they tend to shade their own fruit. I've seen beginners get worried because the peppers stay small. A little trick I use is internal pruning. I'll go into the center of the plant and snip off a few of the leaves that are pointing inward. This lets the sunlight hit the center of the V where the branches meet. It's like opening a window in a dark room. Suddenly, the plant has the energy to finish those big, heavy pods. Let's address the watering myth that is rampant in gardening Facebook groups. You'll see people saying, peppers need an inch of water a week. That is a dangerous generalization. If you live in the humid East Coast, an inch of water might be too much. If you're in the dry heat of Texas, your plant might need an inch of water every 2 days. This is why I always go back to the finger test. Stick your finger in the dirt. If it's dry past the first knuckle, water it. If it's moist, walk away. I have saved so many people from root rot just by telling them to trust their hands instead of a calendar. I once had a neighbor who watered his peppers every morning at 7 a.m. because that's what his dad did. His plants were yellow and stunted. I convinced him to skip 3 days of watering, and the new leaves came out a vibrant, healthy green. It's not about the schedule, it's about the soil's conversation with the roots. Speaking of soil, if you're a beginner, you might be tempted to buy those ready-to-grow bags where you just cut a hole in the bag and stick the plant in. I've tried them. They work okay, but the drainage is usually terrible because people forget to poke enough holes in the bottom. If you want a real, zero-effort setup, use a fabric grow bag. They are cheap, they allow the roots to air prune, which makes them stronger, and it's almost impossible to overwater them because the excess moisture just seeps out the sides. It's the closest thing to a cheat code for pepper gardening I've ever found. I've had subscribers ask, why are my pepper leaves curling up like little tacos? Usually, this is just the plant's way of dealing with a heat wave. It's trying to reduce the surface area exposed to the sun. However, if you see the leaves curling and they look bumpy or blistered, check the underside for tiny green bugs called aphids. They love the sweet sap of a pepper plant. Don't run to the store for heavy pesticides. A simple spray bottle with water and a few drops of Dawn dish soap will suffocate them. It's cheap, safe for your family, and it works. I keep a bottle of soap water under my porch sink all summer long. One thing I want to protect you from is the late season panic. Around September, you might see your plants start to flower like crazy again. You'll get excited thinking you're going to have a massive October harvest. But if you live in a place where the first frost hits in mid-October, those flowers won't have time to become peppers. I actually top my plants in late August. I snip off the growing tips and the new flowers. This forces the plant to put all its remaining energy into ripening the peppers that are already there. It's the difference between having 20 small, green, frozen peppers and 10 large, ripe, delicious ones. As we move toward the end of the season, a lot of people just pull their plants out and throw them away. But did you know that pepper plants are actually perennials? In their native tropical climates, they live for years. If you have a favorite plant, maybe that one Thai pepper that gave you 100 pods, you can actually bring it inside for the winter. You just prune it back hard, put it in a sunny window, and keep the soil on the drier side. It will go dormant, and then in the spring, you'll have a massive head start. I have a habanero plant that is currently 4 years old and has a trunk like a small tree. This is where a lot of people throw money away without realizing it, buying new plants every single year when they could be overwintering their best performers. Coming up, I'll show you how to save even more by making your own pepper gold from your harvest.